weak, it's time that we feed. Your heart is racing, blood is running cold. Your fractured will is whispering. Far away, hear Goliath say goodnight. With each part does your sanity die, sucking the life out, letting the dark inside. Say a prayer as the light leaves your eyes, or scream all you like. Your lightning can't hear you. Scream now, scream. Your lightning can't hear you. Scream now, scream now, scream, scream to suicide. Don't choke on your pride. Scream, scream now, scream. Yeah, I'm gonna watch you bleed. Fenced and free, how does it feel? You're bound as blade, those scars will not heal, no. Lost in suffering, drowning in your tears. Want someone somewhere tell me, go from here, the liar. Say goodnight, with your spite does your sanity die, sucking the life out, letting the dark inside. Say a prayer as the light leaves your eyes, or scream all you like. Your lightning can't hear you. Scream now, scream. The rose can't hear you. Dressed in rage inside my cage, almighty put him else who still bound to the flame that I bear, buried alive in the coffin of the hope I used to be. I'll scream all I like, 'cause we're all mad here. Forever falling into my mind, deeper, deeper. The shadow of hope I left far behind. Just a stranger, we all strange inside. You can run, but there's nowhere to hide. So scream all you like, no one can hear us. Follow me, come follow me to mighty Buddha, still bound to the flame that I've been. No release from this empty waking wonderland. Just believe if you like, 'cause we're all mad here. Scream all you like, 'cause we're all mad here.
The sigh of the shifting sea, the kiss of the salt sweet breeze, the white of her silken dress stained in red, her memory fading fast. Her mother sits, eyes downcast, a torn uniform in hand, farewells unsaid. That once a certainty, lost in grief, a daughter's desperate cries, unheard pleas, forsaken, beaten, tried, on her knees. A prayer passes from her lips into her soul, the goddess whispers. A heartbeat without harmony is moonlight without dark. The heart seek of equilibrium, with balance will your worried heart. So still this broken melody, and there will shoulder thee. One last step only leads. Shintamani, 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 Shintamani. Legacy of the land, the continent in flames, the shores of her homeland stained in red. A memory fading fast, her people's hope, eyes downcast, a shattered faith renewed in Goddess grace. We pray. Shintamani, 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 Shintamani. The lake once a certainty, lost in grief, the people's desperate cries, unanswered pleas, forsaken, beaten, tried, on their knees. A prayer passes from their lips to their souls. The goddess whispers, a heartbeat without harmony is moonlight without dark. A heart seeking equilibrium, with balance with your love, all still is falling apart. So still is broken melody, and perish over thee. One last step only, and empty heart will run asleep.
Shrieks knife through the deep, natureless creatures perverted and evil. From foulness rise, a vermintide, teeth bared, clawing the air. Sing like to sin you, the rats do not fear you. In slaughter's keep, the piper weeps, just wax mark on your back. Here in the valley, your death casts no shadow. Serious rain comes from the gate. Lay bare, drink clean, red deep in the bones that feed the menagerie. Burns hot, burns we follow till there's nothing left but ash.
every secret, every odyssey. Answers unfold, one with the truth, the divine. By my guiding hand, perfect understand. I won't be denied. You are mine, you are blind, a fool till the end. Cast down for a more, I create, manipulate. You're kind in my image, my chosen ones. For you the time has come, the sun is setting. Say goodnight. With each bite does your sanity die, sucking the life out, letting the dark inside. Say a prayer as the light leads your eyes. So scream all you let go, God's can't hear you. Say goodnight to the weakness that you hide behind, believing the lies, feeding the fear inside. Never ask why you truly alive. So scream all you like, no one can hear you. Breathe in my thrive, these seeds rotten and reaping the fruits of your making. Fight, come take a bite. Life, please resist me no more. Twisted and broken, farewells left unspoken. Journey's end, as all you said. Pandemonium. Here I rise, claim my prize. Every moment, every sacrifice. In Anastasio's, I am the truth, the divine. By my guiding hand, perfected we stand. I won't be denied. You are mine, you are blind, a fool till the end. Cast down forevermore. I create, manipulate. You're kind in my image, my chosen ones. For you the time has come, the sun is setting. Say goodnight. With each bite does your sanity die, sucking the life out, letting the dark inside. Say a prayer as the light meets your eyes. So scream all you like, girl, God's can't hear you. Say goodnight to the weakness that you hide behind, believing the lies, feeling the fear inside. Never ask why you truly alive. So scream all you like, no one can. Say goodnight. Say goodnight. Peace, savage nobles, country peace. Say goodnight, heavy lions, follow me. Say goodnight, say the lions, follow me. Say goodnight, follow me. Say goodnight. A drifting tender, comrade, heroes ride. Her gallant severed away with the tide. The storm head gathers, comrade, heroes ride. Illusions scattered away with the tide. Why do weathered warriors wander their way where the wanting wonders wait? Hark the herald's anchors away. Here the happens mine escape. Freedom forgone, sinking abyss, comets crumble, Phoebus fades under cosmic clamor decay. Hides a path untaken. Ancient echoes come right, heroes ride. In deafening silence, away with tide. A wave of hazard, come right, heroes ride. Pulling inward away with the tide. Stellar stories, starward be strewn, slipping sidewise, see their snakes. Twixt the leaves you'll find Artemis. Missing thoughts and crossing fades. Freedom surging, shifting ahead. Comets dancing in her way. To the cosmic clarions accord, along the path not taken. Till the dead tread on the road that is borrowed design. Through the sun of the sands do they see tomorrow? Tonight, witness them as the Come right heels right to my final escape. Wanting I lie, too weary to die, too lost to the eyes for saving. My sins claim me, untain me. Eyes wet with tears, her song in my ears. Broken, faded, how long have waited to open my wings. Turn the light on and let her in, won't you? Turn the light on, turn the light on. You never will, unless you turn the light on. Turn the light on, the pain won't end till you turn the light on. The soul longs for oblivion. Falling too far for the fear to embrace me. A voice from the past screaming, there is no end. A slave to my fate, ever doomed to repeat this again and again and again and again. Falling too fast, no it won't overtake me. A voice from the past echoes loud like a drum. No more goodbyes, though my heart is still aching. Now open my eyes one more time, here I come. Reason resigned, dark seasons design. Spring's promise of sun is on it, when winter's way down on us. Visions in white, raw fury in flight, clear as diamond yet fragile as ice. My heart is racing. Turn the light on and let her in, won't you? Turn the light on, turn the light on. The pain won't end till you turn the light on. The soul longs for oblivion. Falling too far for the fear to embrace me. A voice from the past screaming, there is no end. A slave to my fate, ever doomed to repeat this again and again and again and again and again. Falling too fast, but the fall will not break me. A voice from the past echoes loud like a drum. No more goodbyes, I am tired of waiting. Now open my eyes, one last time of waiting. Now open my eyes, here I come.
On stream without technical difficulties.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lorelines episode 126, which I believe is mislabeled. How is everyone
Tradition.
today?
Not again.
Yes, again. We're on brand. We have scuff. Give me just a moment. Welcome to episode 126.
We always are scuffed.
We are here with Pixel Pebbles today.
There's 2 Pebbles. I just saw that.
I know. I'm fixing it now. So, I'm sorry. So, there we go. Hi, Pebbles. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I promise we're
It looks
Thank
like
you so
Pebbles
much
was
for
like
coming out.
Chopper from One Piece, just kind of hidden behind the corner.
Anyway, welcome to Lorelines. So today we have Pebbles here. Pebbles, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your expertise is.
Yeah, because I'm like a nobody in this circle. Well, I'm Pebbles. I got a little aura in 14. And I like to look at rocks. And specifically rocks in video games. Like I have my degree in geology, my bachelor's. And during that time I was learning about all this stuff. I'm like, hey, what if video games put this stuff in there too? And the more I looked at it, the more like, okay, there's like some things, but it's not like perfect, like not what I'm looking for. So I've looked at like Pokemon regions, I've looked at Fire Emblem regions, like Fodlan, FE4, all that good stuff. And now Dawn Trail gave me so many things to look at, and I'm like, oh, awesome. Maybe 14 is the one that'll give me what I'm looking for.
Oh, that's awesome. So, geology. I have to freely admit, I don't know a whole lot about geology. I know just enough to make myself dangerous to myself and possibly to others. So I'm really excited to have you on and talk to you about this. And before I dive in, I want everybody to say hello, good morning. My microphone wasn't working for like the first 15 minutes. And Discord apparently kicked me out, and I didn't realize it. And I was like, man, everyone's really quiet. And then I realized I wasn't even in the channel. I was like, no wonder nobody's
Heartbreaking.
talking.
Told you were muted.
I wasn't muted. I wasn't even in the channel.
Told you were muted. Of course you couldn't hear me, but that's like a you problem.
It is. And Repsodic says, oh, cool. A real-life minor job quest provider. Exactly. So Pixel, you're our real-life minor job quest provider. So we're going to talk a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean a lot of it, about geology.
I actually were much more generous to Pebbles like yesterday night when you're all saying that you're yesterday night, yeah, the last night, whatever.
There you go.
You guys are basically saying minor job quest giver. I said LoreLinesXIV. I think that I say that I actually it was more respect in my
No, I don't disagree.
in my assessment.
I don't disagree. So I believe you called Pebbles LoreLinesXIV and Fruity Snacks Metron.
Metron, yes.
So they have the land and sea between them. Okay, so Pebbles, what drew you to this? What made you say, I'm gonna go get my degree in geology? I like video games. I'm gonna start analyzing, the geological properties of these games to see how accurate they are to real life. What made you decide to do that?
Well, it was rocks first, and then video games. But the simple answer is dinosaurs.
Okay.
That got me into everything. I'm like, dinosaurs are cool. I like fossils. I want to dig up dinosaur fossils when I'm older, and then I'm like,
That was the same
Okay.
with me too.
Yeah. So I tried. I learned there were two paths. You could take the biology route or the geology route to being a paleontologist. I'm like, okay, well, I like picking up rocks more than looking at plants, so I'll do the geology route. And the more I did that, I'm like, okay, so to be a paleontologist, I pretty much have to get my PhD and become a professor. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I have no idea what I want to study. I just like these things. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, I like what the fossils are in more than the fossils themselves.
Right.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
That's awesome.
And it was during that that period in college where I'm like, I'm playing a bunch of games. I really got into Fire Emblem during that transition, and from there it was Final Fantasy, and then 14.
Okay.
And like hearing about all this stuff in 14, like the amount of effort they put into the lore and stuff, I'm like, wait, what if the geology is awesome actually?
I
What was it?
do recall, and this is semi off topic, but not really. One of the devs, I think they announced this during 2018 FanFest. He used his own vacation time to fly out, I think, to Guam to take pictures of rocks on the ground
Yes.
No way.
to use
Yes, that was
in the game. Are you me back there?
Yes, that was the background artist.
Yeah. So they do absolutely put a lot of effort into at least that aspect of it. But I know there's other aspects of it that are really interesting. I'm trying not to dive into all the questions I want to ask right here at the start because I'm so
I'm not trying to
excited.
give anything away too.
But as far as, looking at 14, what makes you say, this might be the game? This looking at geological formations and strata and all of that, what makes you say this game is taking it more seriously than others?
Well, there were three main things in Dawn Trail that really stood out to me that might have indicated like some deeper thing into the actual game. Because that's when I just started looking at it, was getting all these things that I really, really, really want to talk about. And I think that hopefully, maybe, that this will amount to something that makes everything interconnected, and hopefully unravel like some more in-depth geology that not many people are aware of.
I will say that 14 is guilty of using a lot of real world science as a foundation for their world. I know Aeneas, I know we've talked about Aether just basically being thermodynamics. I know that I did a deep dive into the shards and how they work, and the closest explanation for them is light spectroscopy. So thinking that there's real world geology behind how the world works makes sense to me. Like there's so many actual scientific principles at work that they draw on for this game that it would be harder for me to believe that they just kind of are like, let's just put rocks here. Instead of saying, hey, what's the history of this? Why does it look like this? And, what would it look like given these circumstances? So
why do we put a volcano here?
Yeah, exactly. Which we'll get into that. Why do volcanoes exist at all? Considering we haven't had
Just to spite you.
any landmass drift
honestly.
at all. So
Which
I
is
guess
definitely not sus at all.
no, not at all.
See, I hadn't considered that until it came up in like our hey, what should we talk about tomorrow thing, and I was like, oh wait, there are a lot of volcanoes for a place that has no tectonics. This is strange. What's going on here?
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into that. Let's talk about plate tectonics. For
Yay.
people who might not know, what are plate tectonics?
Well, it's oh boy, where do I even begin? I need to
Let's start
find.
simple.
I mean, I
Yeah,
can give you
that's
my
hard.
layperson understanding of plate tectonics.
Yeah, we can start
It's
with
just,
that.
yeah, it's basically, from what I understand, it's just pieces of the crust that move around. So like, if you think about the crust floating on the mantle and the pieces kind of running into each other, but one goes up and one goes down, and meanwhile, yeah, and they slide against each other and they move around, and so you get things like the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean, that kind of thing. So where the plate goes under the other plate, it pushes up the magma, and you get volcanoes, and when it slides against each other, you get earthquakes. Yeah, that's kind of mine. Am I close?
Yeah, that's pretty much. So there are three main types of boundaries. You got two of them. You got where they convergent is where one goes under the other, and then the transform is where they slide against each other.
Okay.
You got the third one, divergent, where the plates split apart.
Oh, fun. So then you get
So
like
with
that
deep
one-
trenches and stuff.
Yeah, the trenches are with convergence.
Hmm.
When you have the denser plate under the ocean going under the continental plate of the
Okay.
crust.
So what happens when you get divergent plates?
Divergent boundary is a mid-ocean ridge.
Ah,
If you look at a map of the Atlantic Ocean, you'll see that has a giant scar down it.
Ah,
That is where the plates are splitting apart.
I'm looking it up.
And
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah,
and
the
slightly
ocean,
terrifying.
the whole Earth is just kind of split into scars all over.
Very cool. Okay, so when we say that the world of 14 doesn't really have plate tectonics, we were joking about that yesterday, but from what I've seen, I have not noticed any. That said, we don't have a good map of the ancient world,
no, we don't.
and we don't have a good map of what the world looked like prior to the calamities or early calamities. So as far as we know, we haven't seen evidence of it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I don't know.
Which is frustrating.
It just means they need to hire the right geologist to help them design
They do.
the original
I've
world.
been saying that about every single video game world, especially RPGs. Like, you gotta take this into account.
Hmm.
Because I did try to force tectonics onto this world, and it didn't work.
Okay.
What?
Oh, no.
Sorry, can you?
That sounds
elaborate on
interesting
that?
though.
Yes, please.
Can you elaborate
Please.
on it didn't work? What does that mean?
Okay. So because we know like the world of 14 is pretty much based on ours. Like you got the continent placement and all
Mhm.
that. It's pretty much one to one. You know, you got Tyrrell's the Americas. You got Eorzea is pretty much Africa actually. You've got the Far East and all that good stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, if I just lay a map of Earth's plate tectonics on 14, it should work, right?
I'm guessing the answer is no.
Aha.
The answer is no.
You sweet
'Cause-
summer child.
On this beautiful map that we have here, well, you did mention the Ring of Fire. There is no obvious chains of active volcanoes
Hmm.
anywhere. And, like, we only have, like, one pop-up every which way. We got Hell's Lid, it's just sitting there. There's no other volcanoes as far as I'm aware. Like, you've got Charleon, Labyrinthos? What's a volcano?
Somal is also a volcano.
Yeah, and there's one in Vilbrand.
We
Mhm.
also have the South Sea Isles, which, as of Dawn Trail, we did have confirmation of at some point there being a volcano.
Yeah. So they're just spread out, like bits and pieces, one here, one there. There's no
Okay.
obvious connection between them. And to make things
That is
more,
interesting.
like to make things worse, like we don't have a map of the ocean floor. Because they
Yet.
can't. They don't have the technology. Or the will, or the interest. Like, who cares? We just sail on top of it. Like,
Which is
so who
surprising.
knows if there's
It's surprising
divergent boundaries
considering that
anywhere.
Stormblood was the undersea expansion, and we actually
Yeah.
went under the water, and we didn't see anything like that.
Well, we didn't go into the ocean. We went into the
True.
seas
True.
and lakes.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Which
nearly
was
as
obviously our first mistake.
Yeah.
We need to go deeper.
Not even. I don't want to bring shards into this yet, but not even when we're in the Tempest on the first. Like, what's there?
It's interesting, at least to me, because every time we go underwater, the Tempest being a good example of this, but also in Stormblood, it's always like, yeah, there's structures down here. The water has simply covered up a previous civilization. And that seems to be the thing that keeps happening, because it's like 3 places in Stormblood that have this. Again, the Tempest. There's a... Now I'm just thinking about, like, everything flooding, which is not rock related, but like the passage of water
is.
over time does impact the way that you would look at that, I'd imagine, as well.
Very small changes. Like, if we want to bring deep time into this, let's see, when was the final days? It was like 12,000 years
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. At most, you'll get like shoreline changes. So
Okay.
the Earth is
Drowned city here and
4.6
there.
billion years old. And during that time, you have the continents form and move around. And that takes hundreds of millions of years to do. A good example, we have the Appalachians here in North America.
Mhm.
They were formed when the Africa ran into it, and that was the volcanic chain that popped up for that. And so when that split apart, that was, what was it, 300 million years?
Oh wow.
So
Damn.
in that time, the ocean spread. Like, that is super slow.
Back in the Pangea days.
Yeah, we've got 0 evidence of that in 14 whatsoever.
That makes sense.
This is
I mean-
terrifying in its scope. I hope you understand that.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah,
And-
I'm just sitting here thinking like, so we know the ancients were like creating creatures and stuff. I'm like, were they creating other things? Volcano?
Yeah, right.
I
Were
mean,
they a stand-in for plate tectonics? Were they like stopped with the earthquakes and stopped it?
we know that they could snuff out volcanoes.
Yeah, which is concerning. It's
We know
enough.
one ran into one. Saved a
Mhm.
bunch of grapes.
Now I'm wondering though. This takes me back. If we're talking about these time scales, these massive time scales, then it immediately takes me back to the proto-ancient world, which in my mind is when, before they had this, perfect society, when the ancients were still struggling to survive, struggling to conquer their world, basically. What did that look like? Was it the same? Did the land masses look the same? Did they curate their own world? Like, is the way that the world functions on a geological level a result of ancient creation magic?
I could see that, honestly.
It wouldn't be outside the bounds of ether manipulation as it pertains to creation.
Right.
And I hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
Right.
want science. I want science.
that's playing God on a whole nother level, right? Because it's more likely
Yeah.
that it's like, this is a thing that exists. We understand how volcanoes work. How can we create them ourselves? Would kind of be the way that they would approach it, I think.
Right.
Let's just say
Then
they're
we
not
go back
using
to
baking soda
exists.
and vinegar.
Right.
Mhm.
They're like, we're just
On-
gonna move the magma to make this happen. We can just force the world to do what we want. This is
Well, just-
terraforming, and that's scary.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would think of it as something like, we want a new landmass here or a new continent. Let's produce a bunch of volcanoes.
Right.
So,
However, if I may, I would say that I disagree with the concept because the ancients are stated that have wanted to live in harmony with nature, and their convocation, if you recall the short story, their intention when the volcano happened was to basically let the volcano happen. So that tells me that they when it comes to the natural aspects of the star itself, they adjust to the star, not the other way around. What they
Yeah.
did was creating
I
creatures.
agree
Meowth, I
with
love
you,
it.
Meowth.
Yep.
But how did they come to that
Right,
point of
that's
view?
exactly.
How did they come to that
exactly right.
mindset?
Yeah.
What did they fuck up to realize, wait, we gotta stop this?
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
did they? Did
Or
they?
Or
did
did they? Exactly.
Because I don't know. I like thinking like it. Whatever happened before ancient times was just regular old, good old-fashioned geology. You know, plates are moving. We got volcanoes going up everywhere. We got earthquakes doing their thing, and so the ancients come along. And they're like, "Hey, look at all this stuff. It's just happening." And they seem to mostly want about life, like creating life forms. I don't know if that's just one branch of what
Well,
they do.
Another thing that I think about the ancients is that they had these peaceful lives. They lived, nigh unto eternity. They had very long lives if they so chose. And things like earthquakes and other, say, tectonically created tragedies kind of could interfere with that. And they might be like, yo, we don't want that. And they're not thinking through how necessary that sort of thing is for life on a grander, longer scale.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only problem with that is that even if there were tectonics and they suddenly stopped, like there would still be evidence. Like that's not going to
That's
disappear in
true.
12,000
That's true,
years.
yeah.
This is why there's a scene on the Convocation for it. Okay, now I'm
Although
even
I-
more invested. I'm so curious what secrets the rocks of Eorzea can tell us about all of this in the past, because this is a timeline bigger than what we're used to working on in 14. That's
Yes.
fascinating to me. It's a new mystery to unravel.
Well, there's another part that I wrote about, and it's that we could have two models of Atheris. Like we've got, you know, apply Earth's crust, mantle, core, all that good stuff. But there's also what we have is the ethereal sea and the mother crystal in the center, with the crust outside. So like, how would those, like, which one is it, or is it both, or is it neither?
It's already weird as hell because we know that there's lava, so technically there should be like a mantle, like the lava mantle underneath the crust. But then you suddenly go into Charlian, and not just Charlian, but also the anti tower, and suddenly they pierce through the crust, and there's the ethereal sea, which is supposed to be like the ethereal realm. How that like
Yes.
it's weird. It's like it's like you were like sharing the same space with the spiritual world in a sense, and that's weird. Like if I'm going in here like my conception of the spiritual and the physical world in my 13 context, and when you find the physical and the spiritual world together, it usually doesn't mean good things. So, you know.
So I rationalize the ethereal sea away in that it's not like Journey to the Center of the Earth, where the core of the world isn't the ethereal sea. I see it more like how you get aquifers underwater, where it's like pockets of it that are spread throughout the world. But that's just me spitballing and trying to rationalize everything, because I am under the distinct impression from science and peer-reviewed stuff that without a core to generate a magnetic field, the atmosphere just kind of goes away.
Yep.
That is kind of the case. I kind of see the ethereal sea thing as it's confusing to me because it makes me think of other fantasy stories where you're like transitioning to another realm, like the realm of fairy as you go underground or that sort of thing. But I guess that's not really how the lore approaches it, so that is a little odd.
And
If you
besides,
want to go into
the whole thing about the mother crystal, we have to bear in mind that the mother crystal was something that Heidelin created when she decided to break the world. So it's not like the natural core of the world. It was something that she put in there after the Sundering. So that's that whole different thing, you know?
So I was reading up on ether in the old Encyclopedia Eorzea, and I saw something interesting there. It said there is the ethereal realm and the corporeal realm. And I think they're two distinct different things. So these models exist at the same time. It's just like with the ATS scope and all that, they pierce those boundaries where it's weak.
It's yeah. So this is an approach. If anyone here has played FF7, it's the same thing that they take with the life stream. They are overlaid on top of each other in a way that is hard to quantify. This goes into the thing where like me studying astrophysics helps when explaining ether physics. You're just supposed to accept it. It's outside the bounds of like, here is physical evidence. It's the lack of evidence to the contrary that proves its existence, if that makes sense. You have to look where it's not. So think of them as being superimposed on each other.
Exactly.
Thanks, I hate it. I want to be able to walk out my door and the ethereal sea be there.
You can do that, and it can also be a rock.
Yeah. You're not wrong. And we actually
Giving Connor an
have
existential crisis.
we actually have hard evidence of that as well. In kind of how the shards work, where they're all overlaid over one another, but they are all on different planes, for lack of a better word, but it's more like each one contains a specific etheric wavelength, and so they don't interact with each other that much.
They have distance and they don't. They superimpose each other and they don't. It's folding planes of paper in the age-old example.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I can just discount the ethereal realm.
When talking about the physical, that's correct.
Sweet. That'll make my job easier.
I mean, if there's a crystal, assume that the ethereal sea is nearby. But other than
You're
that,
That's the easiest explanation.
I just hate the idea that the mother crystal is the core of the world, because the mother crystal is, again, on the timescales we need, relatively young. The mother crystal is just solidified ether from when Heidelin decided to, start camping out down there. So I have trouble saying that's the center of the world, that's the core of the planet, because it hasn't always been there, and if it hasn't always been there, then what was there before it?
Well, that's where the two different planes come in.
Yeah.
I think we're going to break Cobb.
Yeah. No, this is.
What do you mean that we're not
accept it.
already broken?
My head is racing. I'm just like, but.
Don't worry about the ethereal sea today. Today we're
Okay.
talking about the physical.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
It's gonna be okay, Cobb. I promise.
All right. So I guess my next question would be: we have a lot of areas where we have a lot of cliffs and stuff, and I know that as sediment compacts and turns to rock, you get different layers and stuff. And I know I had briefly asked you this before, but I want to ask you on the show here. So if you can look at strata and see different things that happened in the world throughout time, would the calamities have left an impact like that? And if there is anywhere we can see that?
Oh, calamities. Well, we get a couple things from the 7th. There's one in Central Shroud. In
Okay.
the encyclopedia also says that the 7th made the Sorrel Haven area raise. It just lifted up.
Okay.
And then also the Crystal Tower got lifted up as well.
Got it.
So it does happen. Like, there are a couple things that are said, but we could speculate all day about the extent of it and what can even happen during a calamity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense. But I'm thinking like ether volcanoes now, because
Oh.
we've seen one at the Aether Font, kind of.
Yeah.
Pebbles' favorite would be the 4th Umbral Calamity, the Calamity of
Still
Earth.
Calamity of Earth.
Which is also the one that leveled Sadnor in Bozia.
Yep.
Zadnor, the transformed Zadnor that put the Crystal Tower halfway underground. The one that transformed Eorzea, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But how?
Yeah.
That's what we're
I
asking
don't-
you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. There's
You know how
There's so many
calamities
things.
work. You know how it takes they take it was explained in Shadowbringers. The Ascians find the aspect of a shard elevated to a certain degree. It then has a chain effect from one shard into the source, amplifies it to a certain degree, and then when the conditions are met, the energy is unleashed, the shard is swept into the source, and the calamity is done. It amplifies it to a certain magnitude. For the 4th, it just so happened to be Earth's, which means it was the earthquakes that happened.
But so the Earth, so it can just break apart like Final Fantasy VI World of Ruin?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
there had to have been a focal point, and I believe what I think, my speculation is that the Crystal Tower was that focal point.
And
I mean,
yet it had widespread effects in Bozja, on the other side of the world.
The description of the calamity basically said the Crystal Tower could handle vast quantities of ether, and when Dalamud activated to send ether down to the Crystal Tower is fine, but the ground underneath it was not.
Yeah,
so
it essentially sent a shockwave of ether down into the Crystal Tower. The Crystal Tower absorbed the shockwave. The Earth did not.
It's just hilarious.
It's shattered. It shattered the Earth and just had far-reaching consequences.
They made
so yes, I would
say
say like
wild.
the World of Ruin.
Yeah, it's so wild too, because when one of these to us cataclysmic events happens, like solid rock will just sort of turn liquid, and it's insane.
Kind of like liquefaction.
It's hilarious
Exactly.
because Dalamud used ether from the sun, fire ether from the sun, and how we were talking about how the sun is basically just a giant death laser. They concentrated that and shot it at the planet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like,
So
this
I
seems like a
guess
good
that would
power
be your
source.
explanation.
Anything can happen. Who knows?
So, Pebbles, tell us a little bit more of your theory. How do you think the world functions? So, like, what do you think is the most interesting thing that you've happened upon or that you've seen in the game?
Well, pretty much just the lack of plate tectonics, like you've been saying. And I really like that, actually, even though there's no evidence that it even happened before. So, but then how does everything exist? Because there's a studies that have said that like plate tectonics is the reason that life exists on Earth. Like
Can
Yeah, it's an
you
interesting
elaborate on
question,
that?
though, like-
'Cause
Yeah.
I'm trying. It makes
Yeah, go ahead.
like, okay. So life, they say life begins at the hydrothermal vents in the ocean, and those exist on the divergent boundary that splits the ocean floor. And so this, I think the mineral that's on these vents is pyrite, and when that does, it pretty much gives, like, the crystal lattice itself gives a blueprint for proteins, amino acids, that sort of thing, to form and connect to each other. And little pockets in these vents act like a cell for these to further develop, and like the chemical composition, the salt matter, and the gases that come from there, they form cells, and life begins because of the plate tectonics. It just gives like the perfect conditions for those chemical reactions to happen, and it just goes from there.
Yeah, that is interesting though, because either life on Aetheris came about by some completely different method, or something has changed and we're not seeing that sort of thing, but maybe it was once there. It's very, very interesting thing to look at though.
To me, if I may, I mean, just the fact that we have the short story confirming us that there were volcanic eruptions in the world Sundut tells me that there was actually geological activity in the world at Sundut. But then we go into post-Sundering Aetheris, and we I don't know you guys. I can't actually recall any significant natural disaster, as to call it, because natural disasters tend to be well, we regard them as disasters, but properly they are basically the earth exhibiting activity, you know, storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and yeah, they are disruptive to us, but if we didn't have them, then we would be pretty much screwed. So the fact that we don't have these because I don't recall any of these. In fact, the only major natural disaster that I recall without the calamities involved, that's the storm at the beginning of Dawntrail. But I don't I mean, like, for example, we have volcanoes. Yes, we do have volcanoes in modern Aetheris, but even though they are kind of active, we don't have any information about them having any particular eruption, you know?
True.
So it feels to me, again, like the world, even though it has these elements, it's locked in. Okay, I'm going to say it's locked in stasis. That's the impression. That's the impression I get.
And there's the
And-
buzzword.
I like that a lot, actually.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Neither would it surprise me either.
My mind is running now, and I'm like, if the world is locked in stasis, that means that there's a heavy infusion of light ether somewhere that we don't know about.
Well,
Yeah, that we don't know about.
keep in mind that it's only recently in the world of Eorzea that the stasis was released, so to speak, because the anchor for that was Hydaelyn at that point in time. So Meowth raises a very good point. We've talked about whether or not a storm actually happened in Tural immediately after or during the events of Endwalker. It's not outside the realm of reason that it was something else, but if it is like the first major storm that they've had in a very long time, having that happen immediately after the being holding stasis as her mantle was finally released from that burden, there is a chance we might actually start seeing these kinds of natural disasters going forward. So that is something that we should all be keeping an eye on now.
Oh no.
That is something that could prove this theory.
I love that.
I also love
actually
that.
very
Oh no.
I was gonna say it's actually very funny you say a series of natural disasters, and I'm sitting here like, I think I've spoken about it a little elsewhere. I spoke a lot in DMs with Meowth about it, about how I was suspecting that this storm could be like echoes of calamities because the first calamity was the calamity of wind, and I was like, huh. And then we have a huge lightning dome, and I'm like, huh, lightning was the second calamity, huh. So I don't know. And again, this is just I'm observing patterns here. I don't know what it means. I'm just like, huh.
No, but it's interesting from like an etherophysical
It
perspective
is.
because it is also physical, kind of like we were talking about the overlay earlier. If something was holding
Could be like a
stasis
backlash.
to the laws of physics, which we've established that has happened, right?
Yep.
It would make sense that it's also holding stasis to like the natural movement of the planet, which also kind of answers some of the timeline questions about, it takes years and years and years longer than our timeline for rocks to do their thing, but also asks so many more. I'm afraid this is giving me an existential crisis, Pebbles. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
See,
I
here
am genuinely enjoying this, but oh boy, this is scary. This is
Now-
like things on everyone's list that we really need to be paying attention to.
Well,
Yeah.
there is evidence for like that things do happen super slowly. Like we still have volcanoes erupting. Like Hell's Lit is going. We've got Sorkai is still hot. So it has been slowing down the past 12,000 years. But will that mean it's going to pick up again?
That's the
And
question.
will just the entire Earth system kickstart? And we got mantle plumes moving things, and we got tectonics re-emerging. But how long would that take? We will not see that within the timeline of the entire game.
But if
going
we
forward.
do, then we've
But
got.
if we do that,
We can
That'll
kind
be
of
very
see
fun.
why. That's okay. All right. Oh, I'm looking forward to whatever happens next.
The problem is like think it like the stasis of Heidelin keeping Etheris in like a really 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 taut spring of stasis, and then suddenly she's gone. And what happens when you release a spring that's so compressed, like so taut? It's the effect of going to the other side in a moment could be like all of that has been repressed for 12k years could go like yeah, like can be thrown onto us like in a moment, and it could potentially spell well, not the end of the world. It could be really similar. Because it's
earthquakes.
Earthquakes, eruptions, tsunamis, winds, gales, whatever. We don't have records of any of these things happening. That's the problem. If we don't have that, and all of a sudden it's released, then it could be a massive problem for us. No, sorry.
I will say I will counter that with when the earthquakes were happening in Shalawani, they knew what it was. They not what was causing it, but they knew it was an earthquake. So they've experienced earthquakes before.
But how deep was it? Where was the epicenter?
Yeah,
that's what I want to know.
And were there aftershocks? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing is knowing what something is like. I'm not saying like we go around the Theris and we see like the weather change and have the usual sort of thunderstorm that we do have those, but we don't have is the big things like something really actually destructive, such as for example a hurricane, a tornado, a destructive earthquake. Like we do experience mild earthquakes like here in Spain, for example. In fact, my region is relatively active in that aspect, but we barely notice them actually. But the problem is that when you have a big one, those are the things that modern day Etheris is lacking.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I agree.
There goes my evidence.
And
And that's what
and
makes me not too happy about my hopes and dreams for 14 and how they really did dive into the geology aspect and put that in their game. You don't see that evidence that I need to make these connections. So, like, did they care?
Or did they know? So
Did they
I,
even know?
yeah, that's I don't think necessarily that it's they didn't care, but it's when you're crafting a world like
They didn't
I
take it into account.
yeah, exactly. So you're more focused on the people, the society, and they do focus on a lot of things like the food, which is important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, what do different societies look like based on where they are?
Well,
Um,
that's what more people are more likely to connect to.
right.
Who cares about an earthquake except me?
I mean,
All of
Well, it
us
is
know, Drew.
interesting though,
You've gotten
yeah.
us hooked.
because like if you create the world with these certain tectonics or these other things going on, that's going to affect the societies, it's going to affect the
Mm-hmm.
people. So it is a bedrock layer that's interesting. There's a very good very heart-wrenching book series I like that starts with a book called The Fifth Season. The fifth season is calamity in this case. Well, not literal calamity, not like Final Fantasy 14 calamity, just like everything is screwed up calamity. And the tectonic situation of the world is a major driver of the plot, so it's something that's really gotten into, and it's interesting for that reason.
Good.
I mean, yeah, it brings to mind, like, for example, like the one of the major shifts in like society, for example, that I can think in game in our timeline recent story is Kurthas. Because in 1.0, Kurthas was, I mean, surely it was a bit colder, but it was green and not covered in snow, basically. In fact, we know that Kurthas was changed the weather because after the seventh Emerald Calamity. So that was already something that the calamity actually made it happen. So I don't. The whole thing with the calamities is. Uh, I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about Eden. Okay, you know the whole thing, the whole plot about the Eden Raid series, right? We find ourselves in the static, light, radiated land of the empty, and we start infusing elemental energy back into the empty to make it flourish in the bursts that we made with concentrated ether from the primals. Yes? Well,
Mhm.
but if it's actually the same for the calamities, but it's actually not just the rejoining, was the Asians role or job or whatever, but they were actually forced to dump like force these natural disasters, quote unquote, because they had to either otherwise the Etheres, I mean the state of Etheres would remain locked in this form stasis.
I do find that interesting, actually. Sorry, it's just I was thinking about Shadowbringers and how much they really tightly wove that story, and I could really see Eden being like, "Hey, calamities were also doing other things for the world." Hint, hint, hint. I could really see that.
I mean, now that we are actually going to be introduced to, they basically been bringing back not just, I mean, they've been bringing Shadowbringers back for all of Dawntrail, but in particularly now they're bringing the Eden Raid series as because of the Ultimate. So there's that. I mean,
So, Pebbles, what
Yes.
what do you think is the most interesting aspect of geology that you've seen in 14?
Oh boy.
Out
You're
of
gonna
the
make
things
me
that
go
they
down
have
the whole
gotten
list
right.
of the entire world.
Out of the things they have gotten right.
Well, do we want to jump into Dawn Trail?
Yeah, let's go.
Because the region that does this the best is Yaktel.
Do
Okay.
And
tell us.
it is based on one word that they say before we get there, and that is cenote.
Mhm.
Those are very interesting. And it ties this entire region. I mean, that's only like one part of what's interesting about this region, but that is the main thing that makes up the entire ground that this sits on. And the rock textures are actually on point.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I've never been to the Yucatan, so I've never seen a cenote in real life, but I know what they are.
Yeah, it's basically a giant sinkhole.
Mhm.
And the land that makes those is called karst, and I hate it because it's terrifying.
Why is it terrifying?
Because the sinkholes can just open up under your feet and you don't even know about it.
Oh. Yeah, I
I've
live in
seen
Florida.
like
That happens
pictures
here.
of buildings or stuff in the sinkholes. Yeah, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, I lived in Central Florida, and they have sinkholes there. I was convinced there was one right under my room that was going to open up in the middle of the night, so I slept in the hallway.
Yeah. I live there now,
Like,
so yeah.
sinkholes are no joke. I hate them.
So yeah, I definitely feel that, and I've seen like news stories all the time. Oh yeah, a sinkhole opened up in the middle of the road. There was one story a few years back. One opened up underneath someone's house, and they never found the people who lived there.
Yeah, terrifying. Horrible, I hate it.
Yeah. Well,
But it's so
Florida.
interesting.
Welcome to Florida.
Isn't nature fascinating?
Yeah. Right.
Yes. Alright, so what is karst? I call it cursed.
Ha!
Uh, it is.
That's good.
It's made up of a rock called limestone, and what that limestone is from the minerals depositing in the water. It's called a evaporite, and it is what is called precipitated out into the water. And its chemical makeup is a calcium carbonate,
Okay.
and that stuff is very dissolvable.
Yeah, very water soluble.
Yeah.
Some of this sounds familiar from the chemistry classes I
Yep.
recall,
Well,
sort of.
That's what the Romans used in their concrete to make it self-healing.
Yep. Good stuff.
Yeah.
And so, when
Stuff,
water,
unless your house is built on it.
unless your house is built on, which don't do that. Just move.
Get a geological survey before you buy land.
Please. Like what I do
Okay.
for my job.
So
That kind of reminds me of something that actually is really. I mean, we're in my region here. We're kind of known. Known. Many people outside this part of Spain actually doesn't know, but we. So you know the bed of the rivers, yes. But we don't have exactly so many rivers, and more like when it rains in rain season, and here in rain season can pour a lot. These beds is when they actually may feel. Not always happens, but may feel. But it can be like dry for many years and be like this space, this like comfy space that seems like a valley, and stupid people would believe that
It's a
this
trap.
is a good place to build houses. No, you don't. You actually shouldn't do that, because that the fact that there's no curse of water in that moment, and perhaps for even 10 years, doesn't mean that it comes rain season someday and the water decides, hey, this sounds like a good time to return to this from this place, and yeah.
I miss my old vacation home. Let's go on back.
So many people that actually come here looking for a nice place to build like a summer house. They are, more often than not, they have regretted choosing this this dry waterbed, so to speak. But here, like people who actually we live and raise in here, we know not to make that mistake. But yeah, it's kind of like, it reminds me of this particular land formation from here. Don't build anything on a rambla.
No. So I popped some pictures of the rock textures.
Yes.
They're really good. They have layers. I love seeing the layers, because that's how the deposition forms. Limestone forms in layers. And is in these layers that groundwater can flow. They're they have high porosity, which means a lot of holes in it that the water can flow through. And when it flows through, it dissolves it. And it makes these giant caves. And when the water lowers, it collapses on itself into these big round holes that are all over Yoctel.
Just a minute, trying to pull that up.
So what that means is that this whole place was once underwater and got uplifted. When I don't even know.
That's true. That, like, the structures in there kind of remind me of the bed, like the seabed at the Tempest. Like some of the formations, actually, very similar.
I haven't looked too closely at the Tempest, to be honest.
This is actually really interesting. I hadn't noticed the strata in the rocks there.
Yeah,
That's good stuff.
it is good stuff. After looking at the rock textures in Urkopacha, these are amazing. We'll get to that. Maybe. I don't want to. Urkopacha sucks.
Okay, well now we're going to ask you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mostly want to focus on Workhorse Zamor, and I know you had commented that it looks similar to Devil's Tower, and that was the first thing I thought. I was like, it's a giant Devil's Tower. What, like, I don't know how Devil's Tower formed. Like, what causes something like that to form?
Well, that is a volcano that's related to volcanoes.
Okay.
It is what is called a laccolith that formed. So what that is like a big volume of lava that gets injected into the ground and kind of fans out under it. And
Okay.
what Devil's Tower is, it's I think it's the center of that, and it gets eroded away until it's this giant thing sticking up out of the ground.
Oh, wow.
And the cool thing about it is that it is the rock texture, I guess you could say it for lack of a better term, is it's in hexagons, columns,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called columnar jointing. And it's just the way that lava cools as it hits the air. It contracts on itself and makes these gorgeous columns. And the thing I hate about Workhorse is that it doesn't have those in the dungeon. I don't see any.
Okay.
Hmm.
And it's frustrating.
So lava cools in hexagonal shapes, basically.
It can.
Like it kind of remind me like the shape of beehives, actually.
Yeah.
But that's interesting to me because, I mean, not saying that they're going to use this, but the hexagon is actually the shape of the elemental wheel. It forms an hexagon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if maybe they could tie these with how to say if they wanted with life. It makes me think of the tree at the middle of the elemental wheel, and we know that cooled lava is basically one of the, if not the most fertile soil out there. That's why.
Mm-hmm. So I
That-
put up some pictures of columnar jointing.
Yeah, that's
One of the most famous
super
examples is Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which I need to go to tomorrow. It's so cool.
That's
And
awesome.
that's what Devil's Tower is made out of.
Okay.
You're
And I
going there
thought-
tomorrow?
No, I wish.
Okay, I was like, wait.
I want to.
She's
I've also
casting
never
live
been to
from
Devil's
the
Tower.
island now. That's so cool looking,
So-
though. I always wondered
I know,
how things
right?
like that formed. And then you can see kind of the eroded ones down closer in the water.
Yep. So let me find a picture of the top of Worker's Armor.
Oh,
That's
I see.
not hexagons. Where are the hexagons?
I see no hexagons.
Exactly. So it's not columnar jointing.
Hmm.
It's just a cool mountain that they wanted to put in there.
I see.
The rule of cool, as they like
so
to
would the
Yep,
often do.
exactly.
So the top of Workhorse Zormar should look like that the Giant's Causeway.
It should.
Okay.
Yeah. Just because it's so high up, like nothing's gonna grow on there really. You can see like it's cleared off and like the other part of
Yeah.
it has snow on. Like why doesn't this also
was-
have snow?
Actually shocked that there was greenery up there because it
Yeah.
should very clearly be above the tree line. Because if we're already pretty high up in that area, if you've ever
Yeah.
looked at the Andes Mountains, they are very, very high. So you're already a mile up, then you have a mountain with a snow-capped peak. There's not going to be anything green above the snow-capped peak, and Workhorse or more is above that.
Well,
so
there could be lichens at most.
yeah, but you're not going to get like flora like this.
No, you're not.
Okay. Interesting.
So that's why Orcopacha sucks.
Fair. I can. I acquiesce to that.
Yeah. Here's the rock texture they put everywhere. It's nothing.
I do
You
want
just
to
look at it and it's like,
ask-
okay, that's a rock.
So on the topic of rocks, and I know that you had written a note here about Solution 9.
Yes.
Why do you think it is that in Alexandria the different races are named after gemstones and minerals?
Because they're cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. There's not really
It's-
much deeper meaning in there.
yeah, I mean, I guess we could go into like what is a sphene. And I was trying to find it out, and the closest I could come up with was something that is often confused for a garnet, but is not.
Oh, interesting. Where's that?
Meowths found it and sent it to me. But it's basically a sphene is not a garnet.
They're apparently they're both variations of titanite.
Yeah.
Are they? Let me see Garnet.
I wonder if that's intentional as far as FF9 references goes, because that was something that they did kind of commonly with the royal line of Alexandria in FF9, the princess for which she chose the name Dagger, and that's what you play through FF9 knowing her as. But her actual name is Garnet, so a Sveen being not a Garnet is very funny.
Yeah. It's hilarious. Actually, Meow found it when I was doing my playthrough, and I was like, Speed is sus as fuck.
Sveen isn't a Garnet. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. Because the first thing I saw
I'm trying to
was...
find the...
The first thing I thought when I saw
Trying to
her, I was
find
like,
the chemical-
oh, she looks like Garnet.
She does-
The whole thing about gemstones is so interesting too as well. They are kind of related to Final Fantasy IX. Kind of. It's actually not so much of a because in Final Fantasy IX, in order to learn to master the summon abilities, both Garnet and Eiko have to equip gemstones such as like garnets, emeralds, ruby, the ultimate summon, for example, that's Arc. It's by the way, two side notes about Arc, which is exclusive to Final Fantasy IX. Arc is he was designed as so it's the ultimate summon, okay? It's a dark elemental one and was designed as a tribute to Final Fantasy Tactics because Tactics introduces Zodiac. So Arc was the tribute. There's many tributes that 9 has to Tactics, in fact. The way to master Arc as a summon is through the Lapis Lazuli, and we actually see Arc in the Alexander raids using Lapis Lazuli as part of the ads. So that's kind of amusing there. But I basically mentioned that because we got Arc as the collector edition mount for Dawn Trail. So you know the origin of that.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well,
I
now
disagree
you know.
that Sveen and Garnet are related.
Okay.
Like, the minerals themselves.
Got it.
I found their chemical formulas, they are quite different.
Ah.
Even though they're under the same classification of silicate mineral, their chemical formulas are wildly different. Because Sphene, yes, it is a titanium ore, and Garnet is an aluminum.
Oh, that's wildly different then.
Yeah.
It is. And the combination with its silica and oxygen. Sphene is silica with 5 oxygen, and Garnet is silica with 4 oxygen. Completely different.
Yeah, the point of what I actually sent Cobb back then was not so much about being the same thing, but that the article mentioned that they tend to be
confused.
Confused.
Yeah, but they're
like
not the
amateur.
Same. Yeah.
Zuela in chat also says Sphene can refract light into other colors on the color spectrum, and compares it to Electrope and its ether conversion properties, which I also just think is absolutely fascinating.
That's awesome.
Oh no.
Don't say oh no. We like this kind of stuff here. We've already discovered all of the Electrope potential. We've got that covered. Now we're thinking about the parallels. It's good shit.
Man. I mean, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because Electrope, we don't even know what's actually the proper name of the thing. Since Electrope is the name that the Alexandrians gave to it. Because they call it Electrope because to them it helped them to they made it work with a lightning energy. But we know that the thing actually works with other elements as well. So what's the real name of that thing? That's the question. That's the actual question.
Only in conjunction with organic matter, though. That's the key part there. There's something involved, but that's not the conversation for today. I know we'll
Yeah.
get easily distracted if we keep talking about it.
Yeah, I'll start diving into the first, and we don't want that.
Yeah, the only thing I'd be interested in about Electrope is how is it formed and why is there so much?
Yeah, I think that's the question haunting all of us is
Like, what is it?
and
What's
where
it
is
made
it on the
of?
source, and
Yep.
is it something we already know of that we aren't using?
Mm-hmm.
More questions to haunt us in our sleep.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
So,
No, but I mean, to me, it's interesting how Electrope is basically an etheric alchemical conversion. it's,
yeah.
it's all based on alchemy. It's basically ether transmutation.
So, Pebbles, I want to ask you, do you think Shalawani is a crater?
Oh, I have not had this brought to my attention.
And the reason is because you mentioned that it has sheer cliff to the ocean on all sides.
Yep.
And that's the only formation I could think of aside from a very massive volcano that just exploded that would cause that.
You mean like a caldera?
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly doubt that. Just because like the nature of the cliffs, they go like Kalawani is built up over the ocean.
Ah. Got it. Okay.
Um,
Sorry, I'm
yeah.
backwards. But then I do want to ask about the trench. Like,
Oh yes.
so that trench extends very far. Um
That is what's shown on the map.
yeah. And I want to ascribe that to something, say this is because of this. But is there anything like that we've seen in real life, like this big massive trench like that? And I know we've mentioned the Atlantic, but just kind of like that scarring. Could that be potentially a sign of plate tectonics happening in 14?
Yes. I do think so. There is. So the Caribbean is very complicated. There are like every type of boundaries in there.
Mhm.
You've got there is it's like the source of earthquakes in Haiti is from a transform boundary. There's
Okay.
the ones that slide against each other. And that kind of makes like the scar. There's a thing called the Cayman Trough. And is let's see. It's pretty much a divergent boundary.
Okay.
It goes north-south, and it makes like this little scar where there's a transform boundary where it's sliding against as it splits apart, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
See if I can find a diagram. Here we go. That kind of makes like a little trench.
Okay. Interesting.
On that big a scale? Not really.
Got it.
But I think that's attributed to like they see this thing in the ground and be like, oh hey, that's really important. We should put that real big on the map so that everyone knows that it's there.
So you're saying that there could be like a natural cause to it and not just necessarily a something or someone decided to make this happen, because this is a fantasy world where that does have a reality. There is a potential for a natural cause for the ravine.
Yep. It's just blown up on a scale
That would
So,
be
You know
this
how
kind of
maps like, yeah,
Oh yeah,
that makes
they
sense.
lie to you.
that would at the same time
still
be fascinating and disappointing. Because I
Exactly.
want some like giant battle to have happened there, but no, it's just plate tectonics.
No, it's
You
just
know what?
normal.
Something has to be comforting for us at the end of the day. Sometimes things can just be things.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, it's-
okay with that.
What's also weird about it is that's the only thing that we have about the seafloor.
Yeah. You're right.
there's something that's actually that the whole chat is making me think about, though. That Pebbles keeps referring to the terminology that's actually boundary and fault. And I keep having my mind go to the quest after Tender Valley, and when we are basically told about, well, the Scree and the great serpent that watches over boundaries. And of course, when it comes to snakes, we know which the evolution lore nerds know which entity comes to mind. Um, the fact that this is actually matching with the concept of boundary only kind of reinforces the idea that the concept of the earth, of land, is associated with Zodiac. Just thoughts, but I wanted to share it because Pebbles keeps talking about boundary and fault, and I'm like, they already mentioned this in a way.
I've got cursed knowledge to share with Pebbles,
Do it.
Uh-oh,
but we're not exactly on that topic just yet
the suspense.
I mean, we could be on that
because we're
topic
talking
now.
about boundaries here, but because we're
Is
not
this going to
going
cross my
upward yet.
boundaries?
Yes.
All right, let's go into it.
Pebbles, are you familiar with Aura tribes?
I mean, yeah.
Are you familiar with all of them?
No, because they're like, what, 50, whatever?
So in the in the distant past, there was a tribe called the Harrigan. And they actually have an Encyclopedia Eorzea entry. I'm gonna go ahead and read it off to you. The legends of this coastal tribe tell of a group of their ancestors who crafted a giant ship and sailed out across the endless Eastern Ocean. The explorers are said to have returned with tales of a terrible island covered in massive gray monoliths and inhabited by fire-breathing steel demons.
It's Tokyo.
Okay.
I want to go into what natural obelisks are.
Oh, okay. How big?
Big or small? Because
Big or
I
small.
believe that's what they are. And there's a lot of them. I know that there are some out in the American Southwest that are naturally formed.
I'll need something specific. Because
Okay.
people can carve things into obelisks, and that's not what I'm looking for.
Need
They're going by crystal
specificity.
structures.
An example of like a natural type of obelisk would be kind of like how they built Stonehenge, except it's not exactly man-made. They just kind of pushed rocks on top of each other.
Yeah. I'm gonna reacquaint myself with my types of crystal structures. Ah, here we go. So what defines an obelisk?
So, an obelisk is a stone pillar, typically having a square or rectangular cross section and a pyramidal top. It's also another term for obelisk, which is a symbol or reference in a printed manner to indicate that a person is deceased.
And they're gray. Well, I just want to say that someone carved a rock into an obelisk and plop them on the ground.
It's usually set up as a monument or landmark, and sometimes these natural obelisks can serve as landmarks.
Yeah,
Similar to how, like, I know that, like, the Grand Canyon in the Dakotas, we carved them out of it, but it still serves as a kind of like landmark or monument. Same with like the Grand Canyon, that was naturally formed, but it still serves as like a landmark.
Okay.
If you know where I'm going with this.
yeah. I mean, the Egyptians were actually quite fond of obelisks.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, I'm not sure because this just sounds man-made to me.
It sounds man-made. Okay, I
Yep.
wanted to get your thoughts on it. But continue.
Man made it. Pebbles don't want it.
Pretty much.
I mean, I respect it. This is also part of like there's so much in the encyclopedias where we have references to these stories and the short stories where we don't have a lot of in-game reference to it. So a lot of what we're doing right now is trying to maybe find real-world references for visuals to maybe extrapolate on where they could be going with it. Because in specifically this situation, this is a place that we may one day visit and kind of be able to read into it. And it's interesting to see both where the inspiration comes from for the story and the visuals in the game, but also like where the implication behind it.
Well, I'm looking forward to going there.
It'll be fun.
I'm trying to thinking though, because but I don't know if this actually counts as geology. But in terms of crystal properties, I know it's a common theme in fantasy to have crystals act as data recorders. So I would ask Pebbles about this. If there is an actual crystal structure that has given foundation and
I actually
like
have a
precedent
couple.
for.
I actually have a couple here to give to Pebbles here. I'm gonna drop it in guest collab here. Here you go. A couple of natural monoliths.
Devil's
But
Tower, how about that?
Yep.
As far as magical rocks, I am not a fan of magical rocks. They can do whatever they want.
Speaking of magical rocks,
Oh God.
Uh-huh.
how do you like those space rocks?
Oh, I love space rocks. The ones in Yoctel.
Yes.
Yes.
What
Those
about
are very
space rocks
interesting.
that alter your perception of reality?
That too. Those are neat magical rocks.
I like them too.
I
We
know.
know.
Yeah, like them too. We all like them.
Well, Mal,
Let's talk
if you
about the
like this so
meteorites in
much, I might give
Yoctel.
you one.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm very interested in those.
Alright. So, they look familiar. They are based on something that exists, which is very exciting. It is called a palisite meteorite. And they're gorgeous. Let me find a picture. But they pretty much look exactly like the meteorites in Yoctel. absolutely.
I am heavily invested in this.
Right?
Why are these pictures so huge? Okay.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Oh.
So how are these formed?
There are two main components to those. The orange centers are olivine crystals, and they're surrounded by iron nickel, which is what the core is made of.
Wow.
So it's
These
a
are
crystalline structure surrounded by a metallic ore.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are remnants of planet buildings. It's like when planets are
It's-
formed.
That's very interesting because I recall in when we first encountered the meteors in MSQ, our Aaronville's like, "Here, stick this magnet on it." Cool, huh?
Exactly.
And I was like, what does this mean, Aaronville? What does this mean?"
You can always find
This
north.
is illuminating.
Yep. Yeah, it's the olivine crystals are from the planets forming the mantle, and then the metal is what's in the core.
That looks
Couple
so
that
cool.
with them being described as tears of the goddess. I'm suddenly sad.
Now I'm curious. So if this is like the ores that form when a planet forms, does this mean like it's the remnants of a shattered planet or something? I'm just trying to be like, how does it become a meteorite?
That's a good question. Let me see.
I imagine it might be along the lines of like debris from planetary formation. That would make sense.
Or like ejecta?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
I'm
that's a-
thinking.
When planets cobble together, they're called planetesimals. And what these things do, they fly around and crash into each other, and they spew all these
You know.
meteorites out of them.
This is when planets are in their bumper cars phase.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a violent
That's interesting, though.
process.
Yes. And so that begs the question, like, was this... Because I forget, was this one meteorite episode where they all just came crashing down, or is it over several different...
I believe it was a shower 50 years prior.
Okay, so one.
Yep.
You talked about Aaronville, and I was laughing at him. Because he was like, oh yeah, the cenotes were formed when the meteorites hit the ground. I'm like, dude, no.
Yeah.
He studied animals when he was at Charlotte, not rocks. It's okay.
No one studies rocks. No one.
And
You know
that
what?
proves
This-
how, and that proves the how do you call it, like the thin illusion like that Charlian enlightenment actually is.
Yeah, they didn't care about what was under their feet.
It wasn't on the syllabus.
True.
Which is very frustrating to me. And
I
that
mean,
kind of makes
it
me
should
sad
be.
that they didn't.
It's kind of
they-
foundational, you know.
Yeah, it is, and they ignore it completely. So my faith in 14 has faltered a little.
No.
Don't let the Charlians get to you.
Charlian propaganda.
Charlians get you
Yeah.
down.
It's working. Which is why Yoctel is so fascinating, because I'm like, haha, they don't know about this.
They are definitely leading up to us spending more time deep diving into these meteorites, though, so it's going to be interesting to learn more about them in the upcoming patches, I hope.
For sure.
Well, there's something else that we know about them from the gathering quests. These little
Yes.
blue crystals.
Have you done it?
No.
Oh.
I wish I could, but gathering.
Just do it.
Just do custom deliveries and other things that you just
Yeah.
do once a week and get a shit ton of experience, and you don't have to mess with it beyond that.
Yeah.
That's what
That's
I
the
do.
smart way.
Remembering to do that.
Yeah, it felt.
And did you want to ask about ceruleum at some point? I think.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of throwing out like what would be good to discuss on the lore podcast. Ceruleum is something where I think it's the most misunderstood basic thing in 14, at least in my experience, because you know that it powers Garly and stuff, and that's it, unless you actually, pardon the pun, go digging for it. So getting just kind of an overview of what is ceruleum? How is it formed? Beyond just being a fuel source.
Well, I think it is just oil.
Right.
There's a lot that relates it to oil. Even to the
America
how they mine it in
intensifies.
Kalani.
Yeah.
OPEC.
Well,
And the
it's
way you have to
interesting
put like
because it
you
has
have to put like a little crystal in there to keep the monsters from coming out of the oil. That's I'm just being funny.
I mean, you're not wrong though. The thing about ceruleum that fascinates me is that it exists in so many like states, right? Because we see it gaseous, we see it liquid, we see it in a solid form, which does not make sense because we see it all in room temperature whenever this happens, and that's not how matter works. It's just fascinating to me. I mean, we could always chalk it up to etherical properties in addition to the physical ones, right?
Well, oil does it does exist in the liquid and gaseous form. You know, you got oil and natural gas.
At the same temperature, though?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. I thought gas was always superheated when it came to natural gas. Okay.
No, I don't think so, because it still forms in pockets under the ground that we extract. Just like
I
oil
don't know a
is.
lot about fossil fuels. I'm gonna be honest.
I mean,
I come from a
That's
clean
fair.
energy nation.
that must be nice.
I still live in America, the shithole, but
Yeah. I know. I knew someone in school. They sat next to me, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm just here to go straight into oil where the money is." I'm like, "Yeah, you go do that."
Oh my god.
Jesus.
Whatever.
I would not have survived sitting next to that person. Holy
No.
crap.
Good thing it was an intro class. I never saw them again.
Ah,
Luckily.
Yeah. So oil comes from animals. Pretty much, they were in a environment where they can't decompose. So they just go into the ground and just get buried, and they
So-
sit there until they get compressed by the more things settling on top of them, like more layers of rock.
that's why I struggle kind of with the ceruleum is oil comparison, is because oil comes from that organic material. It's why we call it a fossil fuel, right? Long dead things being turned into a fuel source. I don't like the implication of ceruleum being that, because where is that coming from? That turns into like the Mako conversation, which doesn't feel correct when talking about ceruleum.
Well, it's ether.
So it's okay. Yeah, you know what? That's fine. You turned the magic crystal thing back on me. That's fair.
yeah,
I
because
what
respect
I'm
it.
hearing.
Good move.
because the bodies are made of ether, that just gets like extracted like oil does. Like when you squeeze something, ether comes out.
I can accept that.
Now it collect in like a liquid or
phrasing
gaseous form.
of
I-
that.
I have an off the wall question. So if oil is formed when something can't decompose, and then also pressure is a factor?
Yep.
So would a body in space eventually turn into oil, or would that be just negative pressure?
Oh my
and it
god.
would-
I have no idea.
I'm gonna Google
Maybe that's
this.
something you might have to ask free.
Yeah, alright.
Hold on.
Sorry, that's just my morbid
Don't
curiosity.
keep talking. I'm gonna look this up.
Oh dear. Sounds like a good question for the XKCD guy.
Yeah. You're
Me
gonna cause
asking
his
the
mind to
questions that-
go nuts.
These are the questions we really want to know.
Yeah, the source rock where the oil comes from that's the shale.
Ah,
Oh.
fracking.
hey, we have a character named Shale in
We
Dawn
sure
Trail.
do.
That's
we
very
do.
interesting.
Like I
Yeah.
said, America intensifies.
I have an answer somehow.
Okay,
Wow.
I didn't expect that.
So nothing about bodies, but I just googled fossil fuels in space. There are theoretically like gaseous clouds containing enough hydrocarbons to be potentially considered an oil field.
Huh.
Wow.
Like-
okay.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not sure of the validity of this, but like I'm seeing a few articles of it, and I am invested enough to continue investigating this. So stay tuned.
That's so interesting.
there is a nebula that has been identified as being drinkable alcohol.
Oh, I heard about that. I was
Yeah.
like,
Interesting.
nice.
It's made of
Space is
beer.
fucking fascinating.
It is. I love it.
It's great.
It's also
Almost
terrifying.
like-
It is.
Yeah.
very
Oh yeah,
But
that's
then
the
again,
best part
our
about
Earth
it.
is more terrifying because we know less about what's beneath us than what's above
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
It's
True.
lurking,
I was just thinking about that the
like
other day. It's like,
ceruleum.
what's 5 feet under you? I have no idea, and it probably wants to kill me.
Well, good thing we have ways of looking at that.
Yeah,
I don't.
I was looking at your thing to show how deep the bedrock was, and be like, all right, so where's the nearest thing that wants to kill me?
Yeah, my bedrock is like 10 feet underground. It's not
Oh,
far.
sweet.
Because, again, Central Florida.
Oh, yeah.
All of this is basically reminding me in Endwalker in Elpis when Hermes, kind of snaps and takes Meteon to Hyperborea, and Nemetot makes the comment that basically saying, Hermes, you're a fool. You should have learned more about the star you're treading upon instead of giving up on it and turning your eyes to the stars. Which is something that's actually applying here.
I'm on a complete deep dive. Apparently, the surface of Titan theoretically holds more organic compounds than the entirety of Earth's oil
Holy
reserves.
Crap, that's amazing.
Wow.
Apparently, there's a lot of oil in space.
I'm surprised certain enterprising billionaires aren't very interested in this.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
get on
working their
that.
ways there.
Just the surface area of Titan has more
So-
oil than Earth has ever conceived.
That
anyway, I digress.
actually is kind of terrifying, because then if you think about igniting all of that in Earth's atmosphere and completely destroying our environment.
Yeah,
Okay.
not good.
Yeah, don't bring that home.
Yeah.
That can
Don't-
stay in space.
Leave
it
it where
out
it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Hell, that's the people who keep digging up Orosite.
I mean, it's just a source of energy from
It's a space
space
rock.
that can cause change on the planet and be very problems.
Oh my god,
could go
Earthside
wrong?
is space oil.
Oh my god.
Alright, I'll see myself out. That's my entire community reserve for the rest of the year.
Well, we're actually at time. Pebbles, is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or where can people find you if they have more questions?
Well, I guess I'm sort of on Blue Sky now. So it'll be at Pebble Levels. We'll see if I can, I don't know. There we go. I also draw, I do art. I got lots of
Sweet.
wool questions, I like to answer those. I'm very invested in my character. Pebbles is adorable, I love her. And also, my Asm is a geologist. So that's been
Nice.
fun to...
I mean,
Figure out.
like we said, I mean, you do have in-game basis to say that Asm was a crystal hoarder, so...
Exactly, yeah. I think it'll fit nicely. And that makes me happy. That's something I can give myself. Even if the game doesn't give me anything, I still got...
You'll always have
Me.
crystals.
Yes, I always have magical rocks.
Speaking of rocks, and just a side note, because I actually mentioned this to Pebbles weeks ago, but the whole thing about gemstones and metals, mineral ore, all of that. So I was joking weeks ago that Pebbles, like basically like you have Hades as your patron deity because that's
Yeah, right.
that's actually yeah, like we said, like normally in our modern culture we associate the Greek god Hades with the god of the dead. What's not so much known is that his other aspect of ruling is well, he's the god of the earth, and specifically of the bounty of the earth, meaning like the ore harvest as gemstones, metals, minerals, all of that falls under his domain. And one of his aspects that's tied to his aspect as Pluton, as the god, the god that shares this bounty with mortals, as that they turn into prosperity and into tools by which they can thrive. That's so yeah. So in that aspect, that's interesting because they've been hammering in Dawntrail the theme of gemstones and gold and all that stuff, and it's like, yeah, that was actually the domain of Hades in Greek mythology.
Which is funny because 14 Hades and my Asm do not get along.
I'm just imagining Hades like, here's a really cool, shiny, beautiful gemstone, and they're like, look, plagioclase. Whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is way more interesting. I love that.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming out. This was a great episode.
Yeah,
Oh
this
my
was
god,
a
thanks
lot
for
of
inviting me.
fun.
Like,
This was fun.
I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
same.
And it's a
And
theme
there's-
that's not something not many people would pause to consider
no, it's
in any
not.
setting.
It makes me sad. I'm like, am I really the only one out there who thinks about this stuff?
I mean, not anymore.
Not anymore. Yay.
Not anymore, and if there are more, hopefully we'll find them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you
Appreciate it.
so much for joining us.
Thank
This
you.
was awesome. And
yeah.
we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
No problem.
All right. We'll see everybody next week.
Bye bye.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.